Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out. I'm Anthony Monte, the Associate Director of the Nanovic Institute for European Studies on campus, which is sponsoring this film series. The feature film that we have tonight is terrific, and I can't wait for you all to see it. We have a great introduction for it. But before we get on to that, I just wanted to point out that we have little leaflets in the back that explain what this film is, but also the next two films in the series, Melancholia by Lars von Trier, and Das Blauen Himmel, or Promising the Moon, from director Hans Steinbichler. Steinbichler will be here on campus for that screening. He'll introduce the film. He's going to engage with students during the day and before and after, so we're really looking forward to his visit and to that film, so I wanted to point out those two things to you. Tonight we have Dr. Mikolaj Kunicki, Assistant Professor of History here at Notre Dame, talking about Le Havre. Professor Kunicki is one of those guys that you meet and realize that his DVD cabinet is probably much fuller than yours and probably full of things that you've never heard about, but they're all interesting and you should. So, without further ado, Professor Mikolaj Kunicki.
Thank you very much for this introduction, Tony. I'm going to talk, I think, as a matter of fact, I'm going to talk mostly about the director. Aki Kaurismäki, the Finnish director of the otherwise French movie you are going actually to see tonight. And I think it would make really sense actually to start with one of the quotes I managed to gather from him, which comes from one of the interviews he delivered in he gave in the 1990s, I believe. And listen to this. He basically says this: "Cinema is dead. It died in 1962, I think it was in October." Okay. Now, obviously, this statement begs for some explanation and qualification. After all, Aki Kaurismäki was born only 5 years before the pronounced death of cinema in 1962. He became a filmmaker in the early 1980s. And tonight we are going to watch the film which premiered only last year at the Cannes International Festival, where Le Havre received a Vipresi Prize, that is the prize of International Critics Association. And what I think also goes nicely with this opening quote is that we should remember that Aki Kaurismäki and his brother, Mika Kaurismäki, who is also an acclaimed film director, have been responsible for 1/5 of the total output of the Finnish film industry of the last 30 years. So we are talking about roughly 25-30 titles actually divided between these two gentlemen. Unfortunately, and I have to stress this, unfortunately, only a fraction of Aki Kaurismäki's work has been known and available in the US. Among his most acclaimed titles are Ariel, Shadows in Paradise, and The Match Factory Girl. These three films are very often referred to as the so-called working class trilogy. We also have another film which he made in France in the early 1990s, La Vie de Bohème. We also have a brilliant adaptation of the Finnish novel called Juha. We have the movie which was actually Kaurismäki's breakthrough to popular audiences, The Man Without a Past, from I think year 2001 or 2002. And then right before Havre actually comes Lights in the Dusk, which was the Finnish nomination for Academy Awards competition in 2006. And I think all these films balance between comedy and tragedy. They focus on social outcasts. They contain deadpan humor and wry dialogues. They project deep humanism and sympathy for their protagonists. They very often been compared actually to work of Aki Kaurismäki's great friend, someone you may know, Jim Jarmusch. Above all, I think, Kaurismäki's films are informed by old movies, okay? Especially by those of Marcel Carnet, Robert Bresson, Jacques Becker, and Jean-Pierre Melville, so old French masters. And I think here comes actually the meaning of the opening quotation. It really has to do with the fact that you feel like you are watching basically an old movie. Kaurismäki doesn't just quote old movies, he doesn't really parody them, he simply acts as if he were in a studio making an old-fashioned film. And Kaurismäki has so absorbed actually these old movie conventions and styles into his own cinematic DNA, this is how I would call it, that his films are organically his own. Now a little bit about the movie you are going to watch tonight. Filmed in the French harbor city of Havre, with mostly French cast, Le Havre oscillates between political reality and surreal dreamlands. The encounter between the art bohemian turned shoeshiner, Marcel, this is really the main protagonist of this movie, and Idrissa, a boy from Gabon who is also an illegal immigrant, very soon actually evolves into a fable populated by various eccentrics and outsiders. And I would like to quote Jonathan Romney actually, who wrote this for the magazine Screen. Le Havre essentially offers us the director's usual menu: poker-faced acting, weather-beaten faces, political compassion, hyper-stylized staging, and decrepit barroom interiors lit con amore. What we also have here is Aki Kaurismäki's love actually for old-style rock and roll. So check this old, weather-wearing boys from the rock and roll band of Little Bob, who as a matter of fact is the real character. He has his own rock and roll band in the city of Le Havre. Kaurismäki lights and films cafes, stores, and car interiors as if they were fake sets. In one scene, you are going to see a mobile phone, yet in another, you are going to see a rotary dial telephone. You are going to have a contemporary taxi car, and then you are going to have a giant cruiser, more characteristic of the 1940s and 1950s. And I think we can immediately actually recognize the influence of Carnet. Consider even the protagonists' names. Marcel, and this is the obvious tribute actually to Marcel Carnet, and then the character of his wife, Arletty, portrayed by one of the director's regulars, a Finnish actress, Kati Outinen. Arletty was the female French movie star who actually excelled herself in the movies by Marcel Carnet in the 1940s especially, Children of Paradise, for example. You have also other tributes and other references. A tough police detective, Inspector Monet, here in the brilliant performance of the French film star Jean-Pierre Daroussin, could just walk off Jean-Pierre Melville's gangster drama. And according to director, according to Aki Kaurismäki, Le Havre above all is a fairy tale. And this, I think, makes it somehow even closer to Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life, especially considering the movie's very surreal ending, which needless to say I'm not going to reveal here. Le Havre is probably the most comic and probably the funniest actually of Aki Kaurismäki's films. It is also a crowd pleaser, and very rarely today we have this sort of combination of high artistic cinema and also a cinema which is really appealing to general audiences. So you should consider yourself double lucky actually today. But it is also a comedy which makes a serious political point on the treatment of illegal immigrants in Europe. I also think that this is a movie which advocates the necessity of being kind, compassionate, honest to oneself and others, and having guts. Enjoy the show. Thank you.